Welcome to The Good, the Bad, and the Guilty, where we look at games, movies, or whatever else strikes our fancy, then decide, in our opinion, whether it's good, bad, or a guilty pleasure. We're your hosts, Theron.
And Kit.
Today we have a very simple and possibly pretty popular little series for review. A trilogy, or at least at the time of this review it's a trilogy. And that game is...
Bioshock.
Bioshock is a game developed by 2K Boston and 2K Australia, published by 2K Games and Feral Interactive, originally released on the Xbox 360 but later ported to PlayStation 3 by 2K Marin, 2K Australia, and Digital Extremes. On top of that, there was another port over to OS X later by Feral Interactive, and even a mobile version developed by IG Fun. The game's concept was developed by Ken Levine and was based on the ideas of objectivism while incorporating influences from other authors such as George Orwell. The game itself is considered a spiritual successor to the System Shock series, which Ken Levine had worked on previously.
My experience for this game, I got it a bit after watching a friend play it and thought it looked fun. This was shortly after the game had been out for like a few months on the 360, and then later got it on the PS3 when I swapped consoles.
I started with Bioshock 2 and thought it was an interesting concept. The idea of having any power you could imagine and being left to your wits against others with the same capability was definitely a cool premise to me.
As normal, we'll move to graphics next. Bioshock is set in the 1960s and definitely looks like it with how the areas give off the whole 60s vibe, along with it looking like a city in chaos and ruin with water leaking in and rubble all over. For its age when the game first came out in 2008 on the PS3, I still think it looks good after all these years. Though it could be a little brighter in some spots.
The visuals look pretty worn down, in a good way, and there is quite a bit of detail in many ways. An example of this is what happens when you walk underneath water, which will obscure your vision, not something I've seen many games do, and it's pretty nice to see something like it. Next we move on to story. The story starts out with a plane crash, and coincidentally you're next to a random lighthouse in the middle of the ocean. Seeing as your choices are to stay in the water and test how hungry the nearby shark population is, or heading inside an ominous lighthouse nowhere near shore, you of course do the dumb thing and check out the lighthouse. Simple premise. From this point on, everything goes downhill, at least as far downhill as it can after somehow surviving a plane crash in the middle of the ocean. Monsters attack, a highly suspicious voice asks if you want to help him escape, and the end result of this never gets any better. My opinion on the story as a whole, it's not very good. I mean, it's enjoyable enough if you don't care if the story you're listening to is filled with enough holes that it looks like Swiss cheese. The main story element is a poor twist that actually starts to unravel the entire storyline, and to the person not paying attention it may seem like a clever twist. You're the son of Andrew Ryan, brought up and brainwashed to kill him by a man named Frank Fontaine and his cohorts. Now this twist seems almost like a mind-blowing revelation when it's revealed, as they have trigger words here and there in between areas within the game. Would you kindly, as most people may know quite well if they are familiar with this title. Here's the problem with this. It's a lie. The game gives you many hints that aren't the most obvious, but it isn't until right near the end when you run into Andrew Ryan that the twist is really given any workflow to it. The flashback connected with the twist being revealed itself is actually lying to the player, placing Would You Kindly in places where in the actual game it didn't happen.
Would you kindly head to Ryan's office and kill the son of a bitch?
Logic behind the twist. For some reason, in a place where you can control people with the help of a single plasmid easily attained, they decide to raise a kid without any connection to plasmid at all, somehow keeping them away from the stuff their entire life, solely so they can use hypnosis and trigger words to implant him into the perfect assassin to kill Ryan. They make a claim in the story this is because certain devices only work for Andrew Ryan's DNA. Not to seem like a skeptic here, but I find it amazing everyone else you speak to through the game seem to move around fine, sometimes in areas you can even reach, but more so than that, at no point until the twist is revealed does this ever come up. The bathyspheres you use, the bulkheads, none of them at any time have any sort of DNA scanners or anything similar that you ever have to use. They're almost all lever-based. Are we supposed to believe Andrew Ryan was the only person who genetically knew how to use levers? If so, that must be horrible. I actually have about 5 more examples of how this single plot twist actually pokes holes in the story, but I don't want this segment to drone on too long. To cut this all short, I'll simply say the story is pretty bad.
For my take on the story, I loved it. It blew my mind and made me want to replay the game again to hear all the points where "would you kindly" show up, wondering just how much was your choice in the matter and how much was being told to do. But then also, as Throne said on the story, it has holes in it caused by plasmids. Kinda funny how they messed up the story and the people of Rapture.
It's my curse, my eternal curse. I want to take the ears off, but I can't. It's my curse. It's my fucking curse. I want to take the ears off. Please, take them off. Please.
Then there's the audio files, which give you a peek into the lives before Rapture became like this in the game. An example of this being audio tapes of one of the bosses before he went totally off his rocker. These little things are spread all over Rapture and can be really neat to stumble across one and listen to it. Until you find it's part 1 of 5 and you want to hear the rest of the story and spend hours combing all over looking for the rest. Next up, gameplay. First off, we have one of the main things of the Bioshock games, plasmids. There's a multitude of them from fire, ice, and electric plasmids, which can be used in small puzzles in the game such as unlocking a door or slowing down a machine to hack easier. There's also plasmids that can control Big Daddies or NPCs to help you fight through an area you're having trouble with, and ones that boost you in other ways like making your wrench hit twice as hard or shrug off a blast from a Houdini splicer. The enemies are also varied, somewhat. There's thug splicers who just use pipes to attack you, spider splicers who can crawl over the ceiling and toss their hooks like boomerangs, leadhead splicers who use guns, Houdini splicers which can teleport around in small bursts, shoot fires from their hand, and use other plasmids as well. There's also Big Daddies which protect the Little Sisters from you and other splicers. The Little Sisters are where you get Adam to buy all the plasmids. Every time you take down a Big Daddy and they have a little sister with them, you can get the Atom in 2 ways. A good rescue, which gives you less, but the little sisters give you little presents after a few that gives you Atom, money, or other stuff. Or you can harvest them, which kills them in the process but gives you the maximum Atom from them to use right away at the store. So it's basically a use all now or wait and use and burst. In choosing so, you either get a good ending of the game or a bad ending. To top it off, you have 6 different guns to pick from, each with different ammo types you can pick up to help you beat down the splicers and Big Daddies, and a wrench in case you run out or want to save some ammo on easy enemies. There's also a camera that when you take a picture of something, it will research it, and when the research bar is full, you get a boost on that enemy type, which makes it very useful to become a shutterbug and take pictures of every enemy you see so you can get perks and kill them with a lot more ease and less bullets.
The gameplay starts off very rocky and has a lot of negatives though. An example of this is definitely the randomized hacking puzzles. They're set up based on fluids heading through pipes, and your job is to make sure the flow gets to the end. The difficulty is the kicker, and the difficulty of these things seems to shift and change around so much it gets pretty infuriating. They have a way around this with an auto-hack tool. You can find them laying around rarely, so I used them primarily to get ones I felt weren't worth wasting my time on, such as safes. You can also buy out the hacks, which really curbs the problem of the irritating hacking method, though really makes me curious how greedy these machines are. In the way of combat, the game takes a major nosedive on the difficulty curve. For first-timers, the tutorial will probably have them scraping by thanks to a bunch of issues, a big one being the depth perception the game has. I can see an enemy do all his swings in front of me clearly, nowhere near me, and yet I still take damage from them. This makes some of the early combat annoying, but then shortly after the tutorial, all the difficulty is gone as most enemies are so easy to take out, there's no real threat. Some of the plasmids are interesting, but for the most part I couldn't find a situation where the levels in some of the plasmids allowed anything beyond normal style of zap then shoot, so some of the time even the more creative plasmids such as bees in your arms really didn't have much of a use. The biggest downfall to this is the final segment, where the game pulls out a very annoying segment where you have to escort little sisters around to bodies. Wouldn't be so bad, except these little buggers die in no time, and often you'll get stuck on the little sister while she's being attacked, making it frustrating to defend her. Made worse by a very lackluster final boss, which involves strafing to the side and shooting him until he dies while he spams 2 attacks over and over until you kill him. As for final thoughts, in my opinion, the gameplay is fun enough if you can get past the pretty poor beginning. Story has a nice concept, but shows the mark that they were playing it all by ear. The majority of it is pretty incoherent. In my opinion, the game at most is a guilty pleasure, though.
I still enjoy playing through this game, but some of the plasmids I remember didn't carry the same punch I remember from playing so long ago. I know there was ways to boost them, but when they go crazy at the end and give you the high level of them all, kinda feels like they're about the same too. I'd say this game is still good to play, but feels a little more guilty pleasure than anything.
I feel like watching a movie after playing this game. Don't know why.
The beast! Ah! Open my eyes! My eyes! Ah!